Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello again, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and on this episode, I'm going to be talking about children of divorce. One of the things that happens, obviously, in divorce is the parents, the couple-to-be, have separated, and the impact that it has on kids. Now, a lot has been written about it, but oftentimes these things are worth revisiting. And if you're a child of divorce, one of the things that I want to talk about is the feelings that they have. And this is important not only for those who have been children of divorce, but also for parents to be able to kind of look back on and see what's happening to the kids and to be able to observe. And possibly if there was anything that needs to be done in terms of intervention or counseling or making the kid feel a little more secure, safe, hopefully we'll be able to touch on that and give you some insight. One of the things that happens to children of divorce is certainly it upsets their world. You have the connection between the parents who they've come to learn to depend on, maybe equally. And when that shifts, either because one parent or the other is more the primary caretaker, there is still that connection to the other parent. There is still a sense of loyalty and having to change that to deal with that. Kids aren't often equipped to deal with that. That's why it's so traumatic for them, because they're not equipped for it. Adults, we tend to have had the beginnings and endings of relationships, and we have our own stress that we deal with. Well, when you put people into that experience who've never dealt with it before, it's traumatic, and they try to fill in the blanks as best they can. Well, some of the things that happens to kids when they experience this is they feel very alone. They feel very isolated, at least in their own mind. They may not physically be in that experience. They may have people around them all the time. But now we're talking about understanding what's going on inside of their head. And when kids don't understand, because often, kids aren't necessarily a part of that, the breakdown itself between couples when they're deciding to go different directions. Now, I'm talking to the parents. You could have all the good intentions you want about trying to make the transition as comfortable for the kids. And some kids are very articulate and they can share with you what they're going through, but some are not. And there is going to be fallout. I mean, these things aren't painless. Sometimes the divorce is better in the picture overall because people can then begin to rebuild their lives as opposed to staying in the dysfunction. But again, I'm here to talk about the kids' experience and why their reactions to some things. Because it happens not only on the child-parent level, but it also happens on the child-peer level. So there are other kids that these things are very painful to experience, and you're experiencing them in real time. I mean, kids walk outside. Sometimes they're very, very vocal about their feelings about things. And being singled out for being the kid, being a child of divorce, it can be very, very upsetting, because some people are very cruel in how they reference things. Some people are very, and I'm talking children now, are not necessarily very tactful. They haven't necessarily developed the art of diplomacy. So when you're the target of something like that, you're being set aside. And you're not being set aside for something that's spectacular, like being the first to win a race, or being the soccer champion, or being the kid on the baseball team that hit a home run, or being the person who's being celebrated for something that's great. See, we have a stigma about divorce, about how terrible it is, how traumatic it is, and when you add that on top of it, that's part of the perception that's now bearing down on the kid, and they're being asked to bear the weight of that. And emotionally, again, that's a bigger thing than most kids are capable of understanding or responding to. So they feel isolated, and that could be very hurtful. Obviously, kids have their friends. Some have probably already experienced that, and they can talk about that in their limited way of verbalizing that. And kids do have their own social circles, and they will discuss things. They don't necessarily keep everything bottled up. I mean, you hope that they wouldn't. You would hope that they would have, in their experience, developed a relationship with someone that they can talk to, if not just the parents, maybe a school counselor, maybe someone at a church, or if and this may happen too, their friends could possibly have someone who's been divorced, so they're a parent that could understand some of the nuances of what the kids are going through and make it a comfortable place. I'm not saying that it's that the parents of the other children are going to make kids talk about it, but just to know that when the kids come over, that it's a safe place for them to be. And if kids happen to start talking about certain things like that, sometimes those conversations are not appropriate, and being able to squash that and keeping that in the right place. But what kids go through in that experience, let's say, and I'll give you an illustration, if you're the child of an alcoholic parent, and that could have been the reason for the breakup between the couple, then that experience, these things don't necessarily happen in a bubble. People see this, people react to it, and sometimes people are very insensitive, and they can ask children questions that are inappropriate, and kids often feel compelled to respond to older people when they ask those kinds of questions. So if you're an adult or an older person, find it appropriate to not put kids through that, because they're already going through enough. And there is a place and time for that, but it's not necessarily out there on the sidewalk in a public forum, because people do have to have the space to go through their experience, and I think a lot of that should be done in private. And there's other things that can happen too. People have breakdowns at some of the oddest moments because of the emotional turmoil that they're going through, and something like divorce oftentimes pushes kids to the brink of that. If they're in school, they could be having difficulty with comprehending things, doing homework, because something like this weighs on their mind. And one of the other things that happens to kids is that they sometimes feel that they're the cause of it. And that's a very, very heavy burden. They don't understand the world in the way adults do. So they've not had the life's experience to be able to process these things. So I think if you're the parent of a child who's going through something like this, it is really important to communicate to them that they're not at fault, and ask the kids what they're dealing with. It could be something with other kids at school. You can notice that they might be having issues with homework, understanding, comprehending things. And something that you may find too is that the kid may be going through something, and they may be less inclined to be compassionate. They may seem to be a little more selfish. And trying to navigate that delicacy of self-love. And then there's the other part. They may be in total denial about what's going on and become just the opposite. And that's a different side of the same coin, but it can be very destructive for a child to be in denial about things, because eventually these things come home and it lands on them. So hopefully I've touched on a few things for people, and if you're going through that, I'm hoping the best for you to be able to navigate the difficulties in those situations. But again, that's food for thought. And we're going to be taking a break, and I'll be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back. This is John Johnson, and you're listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. One of the nicest things that I saw that happened recently is I went to a friend of mine's birthday party, and his wife, they haven't been married not quite a year yet, but they've been in each other's lives for a while. But one of the nicest things that I saw at this is that there were a lot of friends that were there, friends to both of them, and they were able to acknowledge the gentleman and his birthday. And it was nice that the partner, his wife, was able to let that be his moment. And what I'm going to talk about is allowing your partner to be in the spotlight. It's a wonderful thing when you find that you love somebody and you're able to share your time and your space with them. And what helps put relationships above friendships is when the partners are able to elevate one another and make them feel special and allow them to have their moment in the sun. Quite often, we forget that our partner wants to feel special. We may think that we're doing things for them because in the experience you think, well, I'm with them, they must know that they're special. Well, here's an example of something that allows that person to be in the spotlight. You have celebrations, you have anniversaries, you have birthdays, you have holidays, and so on and so forth. And those are designed to mark those events. I'm talking about outside of the marketing thing. People sell you anything. But what I'm talking about here is allowing your partner to be in the spotlight and being a part of that for them. It will not only make them feel special, but it will help them to know that you think that they're special. That's a really personal connection. We grow up and we give kids birthday parties, and probably up until a certain age, and then maybe it's kind of upon themselves to create celebrations, create their own life. Well, when we get older and we have our partners, sometimes those things go missing, and it's about rekindling that sort of thing. And as I watched this couple dance on the floor and have that special time together, it was really great to see them have that connection that they've had all that time. Now, I know this man in private, and he adores his wife, his now wife. She was his girlfriend for quite some time, but he adores her, and it wouldn't be any other way. And I know how she feels about him, because one of the nice things, there was a birthday celebration they had some time ago, and the thing that she said that it was so very appropriate, she says, "He may not be perfect, but he's perfect for me." And I thought that was one of the sweetest things you can say about your partner, because what happens is we all go through life making our mistakes in life. We're not perfect, and so we all have scratches on our armor, so to speak, and no one is perfect. And when we see people as being human, rather than putting them on pedestals, then we can begin to relate to them in a real way. And when you have a significant other and they can see you as being a human being and not somebody that's on a pedestal, they can appreciate who you are and the fact that you make mistakes and that you try to fix them and still be in a relationship and respect your partner. And she was saying as much and 10 times more in that very statement. She was recognizing the fact that she's not perfect, but she is a wonderful person. She has done a lot for other people in her life, and she has done a lot for the man that she married, and they have a great relationship. But again, the fact that she put it in the words is that he may not be perfect, but he's perfect for me, I think said it all. And there was a round of applause, and I will try to borrow that when appropriate, to pass that on to people when they think about what it is that they want to achieve in the relationship and who they're looking for and how somebody might fit into their life. Food for thought. On another note, and this is something that happens to all of us, it's when toxic people try to re-enter our lives. That can be a very challenging thing to handle, because the operative thing is re-enter our lives. So for whatever reason they left, maybe they were in a relationship, they could have been a relative or something like that, and they were toxic. We had the experience of something negative happening, why they were toxic, and they're gone. We may have had to process all of that, get through it, and now we're on the other side of this. And then they come knocking at your door again. And it's about how you're going to process that, how you're going to handle that. Well, my hope is that you understand what the cost was to having them in your life in the first place. They may have left you with a bunch of debts. They may have left you emotionally broken, and you've had to pick yourself up and put yourself back together. And now these people are trying to re-enter your life. It's important for you to know about your journey and to have understood what it is understand what the cost is to having toxic people in your life. And I mean that in that sense of people that always want to borrow your money, people that always want to borrow your cars, people that always want to take from you and then leave you with nothing. At least friendships share something of commonality, that you share interests, you do things together. There's something there. And if you're a romantic relationship, there's certainly the give and take nature of that. But toxic people tend to at least give you the illusion that they're bringing something of value to you, but they wind up leaving you hurt and oftentimes alone or used or something of that nature. And it's very damaging to your psyche, because once a person like this comes in and messes up your life again, now you've got to repair it. And in some cases, it may even have knocked you back to a place where that you don't want to go again, because you thought you've healed from that. And it's important when toxic people are re-entering your life or trying to, that you say no, that this is not what I want for me. And you can always tactfully decline people, and if they become a little more insistent, then you can be very clear about the fact that you do not want, that they're not invited, and that you have moved on. That's an important distinction for you to make for yourself. You don't need their permission to reject them. All you need to do is validate yourself and understand what the cost has been to you. And this is one of those times where it's important for you to remember your journey so that you can take care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is your responsibility. And because of that, don't necessarily expect a toxic person to do this. Now, when I say toxic, I'm again referring to someone who has brought you lots of pain and has not in and of themselves maybe matured to the point where they even acknowledge that they've done this. They're just somebody that's using you, and you can't allow that to continue. So by staking your claim to your sovereignty, to represent yourself, to say that this isn't going to happen anymore, I'm not a part of this, you're doing yourself a favor. Now, this may be some emotional upheaval for you, and at the end of this experience, let's say it happened today and you've had to push this person away from you, give yourself a break. Give yourself a pat on the back, that is. Whatever it is that would help bring your blood pressure down to something that's more normal for you. And embrace the fact that you've now taken care of yourself, because this is a very important thing for you to do for yourself. You can't always expect someone to jump to your defense, because you are the one that's going to have the reaction to this. And it's about stopping that in its tracks. Because if you allow this to go on, what tends to happen is that the toxic person plants seeds, and they or put a hook in you, and they try to reel you in, and they bring you back. And I've been in that experience where I have been reconnected with someone in my past who I probably should have thought wiser of, and then found myself in the awkward place of trying to figure out, how did I get here? And part of it was because I didn't necessarily take stock of the journey that I had traveled in with that person. And quite often what you see happening right before your very eyes is that they haven't changed. They may be a little bit older. They may have different stories to tell, but really the track of life that those toxic people are on has not changed. And sometimes the reason, and this is a very seductive thing that happens, sometimes the reason we reconnect or allow ourselves to be reattached to toxic people is because we wonder when we were with them, that if we had a passion for them, we were probably with them because we had plans. And you kind of want to know, okay, what did I miss? Did I miss something? Or is there something about them that I could have been a part of? And that's very seductive because that's really something that's going on in your mind. Now, they may even sell it to you on the idea that they've got all these big dreams and big promises of big things going to happen. But quite often, that's just a sales pitch, and they're good at it. Toxic people are very good at that kind of thing. And you have to take it upon yourself to see that it's a sales pitch and probably nothing more than that. So you take stock in yourself, protect yourself from that. I would say separate yourself from it and go on about your life and see that you are the person that you want to be, and let the toxic person go on to their life. And you're doing them a favor. By rejecting them, you're doing them a favor. It may be the time that you help them see themselves for who they are, and they will take on their life and try to be a better person. But you don't necessarily have to do that at your expense. How about that one? Investment in self. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we're back. John Johnson. This is Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I talk about all things relationships. Here's something that comes up, and can be one of the more uncomfortable things to deal with, but it's loaning money to someone. Now, in the relationship thing, friends who happen to come up short, they want to borrow a few dollars here and there, and it may be a little awkward, but you may say yeah, and that could be someone who's really reliable. You can at least have that exchange and not have some real uncomfortable things happen. Small amounts, $10, $20, $100, whatever your pocket can afford. But when things start to become a little more deeper in your pocket, let's say thousands, several thousand, then, it sort of begs to differ what your philosophy is about having and being able to say no to people and having friendships and so on and so forth. Certainly, there are people that are cash poor, and it could be part of their philosophy as to why they come up short. Maybe they're extravagant, don't pay the bills on time, and that sort of thing. Or maybe it could be a one-time thing. But what I'm talking about is the person that has the experience of being asked to give money, and how uncomfortable that can make you, and why you wouldn't say no if you wanted to. Obviously, saying no is your option. It's a choice that you make. And when somebody is coming to you, wondering about your obligation to say yes and why you would do that if you feel uncomfortable doing so, especially loaning. And you might consider the word give because you don't know that it's going to come back. But when you're loaning money to someone, being able to ask the question, when are you going to pay me back? Writing it down as an agreement, like it's a contract, that's not a violation of anyone's experience, I would think, because we're used to writing things down and agreeing to some sort of schedule to pay it back. I have been in that uncomfortable position of that, and it was easier for me to say yes and loan it than it was for me to say no. And eventually I did get to that place where I could say no to someone and feel a lot less guilty, because what I had to learn is that it was not my job to solve everyone else's problem. And I think that might be the key here. Is it's nice to be asked to do things, but telling me that it is my privilege to loan somebody money, and I'm saying privilege in quotes because that's somebody's sales tactic in order to get you to give it to them. And you have to see that really loaning money oftentimes is a faster way to undo a relationship, because when you loan money, you have to look at it from the standpoint that you may not get it back. And I strongly ask that if you are in the position of doing that, make sure that you're not risking your own financial health by doing something as a favor. I'm calling this a favor for someone else. Now, it's definitely hard to tell a person who would be a significant other, a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's hard to tell them no to anything, because you might feel that your relationship is at stake for saying no and rejecting that. And that obviously brings to the table the discussion about money in the relationship and where that's going to go, because children, sex, and money are the three things that come up in relationships all the time, and those could be flashpoints. So talking about those things ahead of time is very beneficial, because when the moment or opportunity comes when you have to visit that, then at least you can say, go back to those earlier conversations about the subject. Now, going back to the experience of having a friend who wants to borrow from you, saying no is okay. And it is okay to say no. And my position on this is, when you do that, when you choose to say no, it is not about asking the person 40 questions as to deciding whether it's a valid enough reason, because that might sound as though you're being judgmental about the other person's needs. Now, their needs could be very valid, but they can also ask someone else and make that their option to do so. So let's not make this about you judging them in any way, shape, or form. No is no, and for that reason. But if you're a parent and you're in the experience of dealing with a child that's asking for money, you have to look at it from a standpoint of, what have you taught them about money? And what are you going to teach them from this point forward? Because as a parent, I wouldn't think that you have an endless supply, but you do want to teach your kids to be self-sufficient. Now, if they're promoting themselves and having a business and have some sort of plan, and they want to do well with this, then you can create a plan for paying it back. This is not just something that you just do willy-nilly. But in that experience, there is an objective, and that's to be self-sufficient. But for people that just come to you time and time again and want handouts, you have to learn how to protect your own interest, and learning how to say no adds value to yourself and to those that you're responsible for. Because here's another thing that happens. When you have friends that come and borrow from you or want to borrow, you would want to have a conversation with your significant other. And I think you do that with the interest of your significant other has something at risk too. And they may remind you of something that you may forget. And especially when it comes to this thing about loaning money or people borrowing from you, they might remind you of your values or something that you've discussed in the conversation. And it could be beneficial to revisit that at that time. So this is a philosophy. This is something of my own experience in life and where I go with it. I don't say absolutely no to loaning money to friends or family. I just say that it comes with a lot of risks. There are definitely pitfalls to doing it. And in the big picture, you want to be looking at it from the standpoint of what could possibly happen. I'm John Johnson. This is Golden State Media Concepts, podcast on relationships, and I want to thank you for joining me. Join me next time, and we'll talk about all things relationships.